Number 7. Christina Pongrax. A 29-year-old woman by the name of Christina Pongrax was brought to trial over the death of her elderly boyfriend, William Herchenrieder, in 2010. 77-year-old Herchenrieder, a wealthy man from Good, Virginia, was found badly beaten in his home on May the 4th. After being hospitalized for several months, Herchenrieder ultimately passed away from his injuries in August. Following an autopsy, his death was ruled a homicide, and his girlfriend, nearly 5 decades his junior, was determined to have been the perpetrator. Pongrax had reportedly grown angry at Herchenrieder after he'd expressed his intention of ending their relationship and kicking her out of his Bedford County mansion. Pongrax proceeded to attack him with his own walking stick, inflicting the severe injuries that would eventually lead to his demise. She was arrested a day after Herchenrieder had been brought to the hospital and initially charged with aggravated malicious wounding. However, following the victim's death, prosecutors decided to pursue a first-degree murder charge against Pongrax. Her fate was determined in February of 2012 when she was sentenced to 15 years in prison for the brutal beating of her boyfriend. Herchenrieder had sparked up an intimate relationship with the young woman roughly a decade prior to the incident, when she was just 18 years old. Number 6. Paul Gonzalez. 45-year-old Paul Gonzalez of Los Angeles, California scammed at least 20 women into paying for exorbitantly priced gourmet meals in a series of dine and dash incidents that subsequently became infamous. Gonzalez was out of work and with no income on which to rely, he formulated a criminal plot centered on manipulating women into paying for his food. The scheme was fairly straightforward in structure, as Gonzalez would go on various online dating sites to court his victims. He invited them out on lavish dates to some of Los Angeles' most popular high-end eateries, restaurants like Tam O'Shanter and Smitty's Grill. After ordering excessive amounts of food, Gonzalez would come up with an excuse to leave the table, often telling his dates that he had to make an important phone call. He would then take off without paying for the expensive meals he'd ordered, leaving his unsuspecting victims to pick up the check. Gonzalez later became known as the Dine and Dash Dater after a woman named Marjorie Moon posted about her experiences with the scammer on Facebook. She said that Gonzalez had ordered $250 worth of food and drinks on their date before leaving her, a single mother of 5 children, to pay for it all. Her post went viral and she was invited onto radio and television programs to expand on her story. This helped lead to the discovery of 20 women in total who came forward with dates, the course of which had been very similar to Moon's. Gonzalez was eventually charged with 7 counts of extortion, 2 counts of attempted extortion, and 1 count of grand theft. Although he faced a maximum penalty of 13 years in prison, he was ultimately sentenced to 120 days behind bars. Number 5. Lydia Abdel-Malik. Serial catfisher Lydia Abdel-Malik of Melbourne, Australia, was found guilty of 6 counts of stalking, which put her behind bars for 2 years and 8 months. One of the victims she'd preyed upon was a 29-year-old woman who later took her own life due to the mental anguish Abdel-Malik caused her. The victim, identified simply as Emma, had first gotten into contact with Abdel-Malik back in 2011. The stalker posed as well-known Australian actor Lincoln Lewis in their online interactions. Emma was a childhood friend of Lewis's, but she hadn't spoken with him in many years. She was soon manipulated into thinking that she'd begun an online dating relationship with him. Emma sent revealing photographs to the person she believed to be Lincoln Lewis and regularly engaged in explicit conversations with them over text. After a few months, Emma became suspicious that the Facebook account she thought belonged to Lewis might actually be a fake, as the actor had been consistently cancelling their plans to meet up at the very last minute. She managed to get in touch with the real Lewis, who claimed to have no knowledge of their purported relationship. Abdel-Malik continued to stalk Emma through the dummy account she had created. Even after her ruse was found out, she sent threatening messages and even disseminated the lurid pictures Emma had sent her to people she knew. The woman took her own life in 2018 after years of torment at the hands of the cruel catfisher. Abdel-Malik used phony internet personas and fake social media accounts to stalk as well as mentally and emotionally abuse a total of 6 individuals. Prosecutors claimed she carried out her deceptions in pursuit of some sort of twisted pleasure that she received from their suffering. She appealed her convictions and sought to have her charges set aside by the County Court of Victoria. Number 4. Titus Clarice. After skipping out on around 100 restaurant bills and earning a reputation as Belgium's most prolific dine and dasher, 35-year-old Titus Clarice was found dead in January of 2014, having been repeatedly stabbed inside his apartment. Residents of the medieval university town of Ghent had long known of Clarice's devious exploits, and despite the illegality of his actions, he had become somewhat of a mini-celebrity within his community. He was a man of humble means who was said to have lived off government aid for much of his adult life. His welfare checks amounted to less than $50 a week, but Clarice still insisted on dining at some of Ghent's most expensive establishments. After gorging himself on extravagant meals for which Clarice knew he hadn't the money to pay, he would simply inform the restaurant of his inability to cover the bill. Sometimes he would be allowed to walk away consequence-free, but he also spent a number of nights in jail due to his brazen and compulsive dine and dash antics. He claimed not to mind the nights behind bars, insisting the hearty meals he'd enjoyed were well worth the punishment. In 2009, Clarice was fined approximately $2,000 and sentenced to 6 months of house arrest for his behavior. Even so, he continued his rampant freeloading until the day he died. Authorities struggled to establish a suspect in his killing, though some have speculated that Clarice was murdered by a maligned restaurant owner still harboring a grudge over an unpaid bill. Number 3. Charles Bisucci. In August of 2017, a wealthy woman named Marilyn Burden, aged 70, was murdered by her 69-year-old partner, Charles Bisucci. He made little effort to hide the fact that he was an exploiter and openly referred to Burden as his superannuation, a financial term that describes regular payments made to a person's pension fund. The couple had lived together in Burden's East Melbourne mansion since 2011. Their relationship had continued despite the fact that Bisucci was romantically involved with another woman. Burden had gradually grown weary of her boyfriend relying on her for support. After decades of financial mismanagement and fraud, Bisucci found himself without a cent to his name in the months leading up to the killing of his girlfriend. She had kicked him out of her luxury Kew home and cut him off from her money as well. Bisucci's firearms license had been suspended in 2004 after violence with a previous partner had led to him being declared a prohibited person. However, he successfully subverted the laws and regulations, keeping him from acquiring a weapon by forging permit applications and illegally obtaining a total of 16 firearms between 2004 and 2017. He used one of these illicit guns to carry out the killing of Marilyn Burden. He shot her inside her Melbourne home before turning the gun on himself. Number 2. Carol Richardson. 47-year-old Carol Richardson was arrested by Houston police in September of 2020 after it was discovered that he'd been illegally housing more than 30 elderly and disabled individuals in a dilapidated nursing home. Officers who arrived at the scene described the conditions of the home as deplorable, as cockroaches had infested the building while Richardson had neglected to provide adequate food and medication for the ailing people residing at his unlicensed group home. It wasn't the first time Richardson had been found unlawfully operating a home for individuals in need of care. In fact, at the time of that particular incident, Richardson was out on bond from a separate case in which he was accused of assaulting a disabled person who lived in one of his decrepit group houses. It's been reported that the man was running a total of 7 homes for the elderly and disabled. He regularly used residents' debit cards for cash withdrawals, or in one instance, to purchase $1,000 worth of supplies for his church, even though he was only authorized to use the cards for his residents' monthly rent charges. In July of 2021, Richardson was granted 5 felony bonds and was released from jail. Just a month later, however, he was charged with 2 more felonies for injuring an elderly or disabled individual once again. Subsequent updates on the case indicated that the authorities were still attempting to locate Richardson, who had been on the run since his release. Number 1. Christina Ott. Utah woman Christina Ott, a Layton native, fell victim to a pernicious romance scam that turned her into a criminal's unwitting money mule. In September of 2020, Ott had taken to online dating platforms to try and find a partner in the aftermath of her recent divorce. The retired woman was in an arguably vulnerable state of mind when she was first targeted by an individual looking to use her to discreetly launder money. Her internet suitor appeared to be someone searching for love and was seemingly on the same wavelength as her. However, As their relationship progressed, it soon became far more financial in nature. The pair came up with a plan to open up a restaurant in Salt Lake City. At that point, Ott's boyfriend began asking her to deposit large amounts of money into her bank account, claiming that the cash was flowing in from investors in their business. She would then transfer the money back to him, ostensibly to pay for various expenses relating to the construction of their restaurant. Ott claimed to have moved a total of roughly $1 million through her account over the course of their online relationship. When the man she believed to be her boyfriend continually refused to meet her in person, she began to grow suspicious. Ott cut off communication with him, stopped transferring his money, and filed a report with the Layton Police Department. 5 months later, Ott went to visit her nephew at a military base, but in order to be allowed on the premises, she had to undergo a background check. After being asked to wait for over an hour while the verification process was being completed, Ott was arrested in front of her grandchildren. Reportedly, there was a warrant out for her arrest in Powell County, Kentucky. She was on the receiving end of a Class C felony charge relating to the financial misdeeds she had unknowingly helped facilitate for her boyfriend. Prosecutors offered her a plea deal that dropped the felony charges and instead required her to pay a $5,000 fine. Thanks for watching. Would you rather lose all your money in a pyramid scheme or be forced to give 90% of your money to the one person in this world that you'd least like to give it to? Let us know in the comments section below.